Live from America's finest city. This is Real Talk San Diego on ESPN 1700.
What's happening, gang? You are back live in the Secret Stash. I'm your host, Jesse Ibanez. I got you here locked down for the 11 to 12 o'clock hour, ESPN Radio 1700. Tracking down some of the coolest local people. Antonio, I think you fit that bill, talking about some important local stuff. And hopefully with the emphasis on leaving us a little better than how you found us. And in the studio for the hour live today, I've got Antonio Maldonado. He is the owner of Maldonado Law Group, downtown San Diego headquarters, right?
Yes, that's right.
And you can catch him, by the way, at Maldonado-law-group.com. Now, Antonio, let me set this up. So, you know, our intention on having this ESPN local affiliate throughout the middle of the day here is to put a spotlight on things that are germane to us, right? Because this is only a signal that reaches out to the county here. But then also, you know, trying to create some theme or emphasis, and so that there's a narrative that gets pulled forward. And one narrative that I see, of course, that is very germane to what we do in helping folks get into and out of homes and interacting with as many local businesses as we do, is the relationship between U.S., the border, which is actually its own little entity, and then, of course, Mexico. And
right.
So this is your domain. This is your specialty. So
yes, it is.
Before setting it up any further, why don't you just kind of pick us up from there,
right,
and share like who you are, what you do.
Of course. Well, I'm an attorney, and I'm licensed to practice law both here in California and in Mexico. I actually went to law school both in Mexico and here in the U.S. and at American University in Washington, D.C.
So you're a glutton then, because you didn't just go to law school once, you went twice.
I did. That's right. And so it just happens that I got involved in cross-border business between Mexico and the U.S. Because of the situation, in the sense that I'm a native San Diegan. I was born here in San Diego, raised between San Diego and Tijuana.
Okay.
My family is originally from Mexico.
Okay.
And while growing up, my parents had businesses in Tijuana, and so I would go there very often. Part of my schooling during grade school I did there.
Interesting.
And then I finished up high school here, but instead of going to college here in the U.S., I went to Mexico, did what's called a bachelor's in laws, licenciatura en derecho. Okay. And then after that, I came back, did law school here in the U.S. And so I've always been across both, across the border on both sides. And I've always been involved in both cultures, both languages, both worlds. Really.
Right, versus like just being one and then learning the other language.
That's right.
Like you've actually been fully immersed in both.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And so because of that reason, getting involved in cross-border business just came like second nature to me, especially after gone through the process of going through law school in both countries. A long time ago, I used to practice in immigration law, U.S. immigration law, and then that actually transitioned over into business law because it was just that much more dynamic, that much more interesting, and that's where I've stayed.
I could totally see that making sense. And so there now comes into focus the pretext now comes in focus the context of what I want Stash Nation, and people who learning you for the first time right now to get a clear understanding about, because there is so many integrated dynamics that go on between that too. And I mentioned, I stumbled on this earlier, just talking about how the border in of itself is its own entity. Right. So you really have three entities you're dealing with, right? If you want to think of it like that.
I guess if you do, yes, that's right. Now, there are tons of jobs that are created here in the U.S. because of trade with Mexico.
Right.
The latest statistics that I read was about over 6 million jobs here in the U.S. are directly related to trade with Mexico.
Wow.
Here in California, it's
like
over 700,000.
Meaning Mexico is the biggest client of those jobs, or like how so specifically?
Well, it's because of the exports that the U.S. is exporting into Mexico.
Right.
And then the goods that the U.S. imports into Mexico, curiously enough, are based as a 40% U.S. content. That means that every time that you buy, let's say, for instance, $100 of goods made in Mexico, you're buying $40 of content that was made here in the U.S. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really integrated. Let's say, for instance, the production of automobiles, U.S. automobiles. It's really production sharing here in North America based out of NAFTA. Both Canada and Mexico, they're both involved.
Right.
And car parts really travel on average 8 times across the border before a car is fully assembled and sold. And so these are not really U.S. cars. These are North American cars that have Mexico as one of the manufacturing sites for many of the parts, and in Canada as well. And so this is really a very integrated region, and in that sense, there's a lot of business going on between Mexico and the U.S.
So fair enough. And so now help me kind of close the cognitive loop. And I feel like you set it up perfectly. And I love how you brought in the awareness of the NAFTA thing. And you might say if that is the case, and a car is taken 6 parts to come back and forth before it's actually built, you might say that's the one vision of NAFTA that actually came to fruition, that hope. But so how is this now, if you could distill this back down, okay, how is this something that you're able to help folks with?
Well, I have clients that are businesses and clients who are business owners that have been engaged in selling products to Mexico, exporting products to Mexico, and setting up businesses in Mexico for either manufacturing, for outsourcing in terms of call centers and other things that require lots of labor, but you can get that at a much lower rate in Mexico than you can here. And so the cross-border aspect of business is those businesses that have to do with both Mexico and the U.S., and we help them establish the businesses, set up the contracts between the different parts, and in general, just help them through that process. We are a California law firm, and I'm a California attorney, but in addition to myself, we also have a law office in Tijuana and several attorneys who are licensed only to practice in Mexico.
So if somebody was either a business owner here in the United States, ideally in San Diego, and or if they were a business owner in Tijuana or another part of Mexico, that you would say would be your primary client.
It is.
Somebody who's trying to bridge the gap, so to speak.
That's right.
And facilitate either import or export, respectively.
Goods or services, because services are also something that's being traded between Mexico and the U.S.
Yeah,
There's
so
over $35 billion in trade in services between Mexico and the U.S.
Because I feel like goods is what normally is purported. So help me out with the service thread. What's that look like? Right.
Well, it can be advertising, it can be telecommunications, it can be banking, it can be many things. Like, for instance, something that I've recently helped some clients with was set up a call center. This service is a very specific service. These guys were giving customer service and sales for a company that's based out of San Diego, and they wanted to just have more efficiencies. They needed to reach out to the Hispanic base here in California, and so it was just that much of a better idea to set up this subsidiary in Tijuana where people spoke both English and Spanish, and because of internet connections, they can essentially have U.S.-based numbers out of that office that they set up, and now they have people there working at a lot less than what they would be paying here in San Diego.
Beautifully done. Antonio, thank you so much for getting us caught up to speed. That's Antonio Maldonado, gang, Maldonado Law Group, and you can catch him. He's got offices here in downtown San Diego and Tijuana, and on the web at Maldonado, that's MALDONADO -law-group.com, or you can catch him by calling him down at 619-342-1422. Again, that's 619-342-1422. Now, gang, this conversation right now is also streaming live through the Meerkat app on Twitter. So if you go to follow the stash over on Twitter, you can ask Antonio any question, put him in the hot seat, so to speak, and we'd love to be able to see if we can get any of your inquiries about, hey, maybe you're a business owner here in the United States and you're trying to get some clarity around how to move things south, so to speak, goods or services, or vice versa. So, Antonio, coming up, I want to get into that rabbit hole of outsourcing specifically, and there's a couple rules to outsourcing goods or services that I'd love for you to give Stash Nation a little bit clearer understanding about. So Real Talk Radio San Diego, we'll be right back. We got Antonio Maldonado in the Stash. Thanks for hanging out.